My name is Nora Carter, and I'm 32 years old. For as long as I can remember, I've been the responsible one, the daughter who always showed up, who never forgot birthdays, who paid the bills when others couldn't be bothered. Not because I was born that way, but because somewhere along the line my family decided that's who I was supposed to be. When Mom needed someone to pick up groceries or settle the water bill, it was always Nora will handle it. When Dad couldn't figure out the online tax form, I was there at 2 a.m., typing numbers while he snored on the couch. And when my brother Nathan failed yet another startup idea, kombucha delivery crypto coaching, a podcast about 90s wrestling. I was the one quietly sending my parents grocery money so they wouldn't ask him for help and bruise his fragile ego. I told myself it was fine. That being dependable was my strength. That one day they'd see me, not just as the reliable daughter, but as the person who held the whole damn family together. That's why I didn't complain when I started paying their property taxes. It was supposed to be temporary, just 1 quarter. Dad was between jobs, and Mom said, "We'll pay you back as soon as we can." I smiled, nodded, and transferred the money. Then I did it again the next quarter. And again. 5 years passed like that. 5 years of temporary. But I didn't mind, because every time I clicked submit payment, I thought, this house will be mine one day. Not in a greedy way, just fair. I grew up here, fixed its leaky pipes, painted the porch, crawled under the floorboards with Dad to rewire the outlets when he accidentally drilled through a junction box. So when I saw the email that day at lunch, it didn't register right away. Congratulations on the updated deed filing for 1487 Oak Ridge Lane. Updated deed. I almost laughed, probably another bureaucratic mistake. But when I opened the attachment, my hands went cold. Owners David and Margaret Carter. That was it. No and daughter. No mention of me. Not even as a backup contact. 5 years of payments, 5 years of loyalty, erased like I'd never existed. At first, I thought it was an oversight. I even smiled at my reflection in the office window, whispering, "You're overreacting." But deep down, I knew. I'd been erased deliberately. I called Mom. She answered with that half-distracted tone she reserves for things that annoy her. "What is it, Nora? I'm with the garden club." I didn't ask what that meant. "Did you update the deed?" Silence. Then a sigh. "Oh, you saw that. We talked about it, remember? Your father and I just wanted to keep things clean legally. You're young. You'll have your own place eventually." Something in me snapped. Her words weren't sharp, but they cut anyway. You'll have your own place eventually. Like the years I spent carrying their bills were just a warm-up act for independence I hadn't asked for. I didn't yell, didn't cry, didn't beg. I just said, "Okay, thanks for letting me know," and hung up. But that night I printed out every tax receipt I'd ever paid in their name, each line item, like a record of invisible devotion. I labeled the folder, "Not My House." Then I poured myself a glass of wine, stared at the screen, and said out loud, "If it's not mine on paper, it's not my problem anymore." The next morning, I didn't send the usual payment reminder. When Mom texted a grocery list for Sunday dinner, I replied with a thumbs up and never showed. When Dad called asking if I could check the sump pump again, I said I was busy with work. And for the first time in my life, I meant it. A week later, the county sent a late notice delinquent property tax warning. It was still routed through my email since I'd set up the alerts years ago. I hovered my cursor over the forward button, then closed the tab. Let them see what it feels like when silence answers. But that silence, my silence, wasn't revenge. It was revelation. Because for the first time, I realized I'd spent years believing that love meant being useful, that the more I gave, the more I'd be seen. But love that needs proof isn't love. It's a ledger. A few days later, I scrolled past Nathan's Instagram post, "Family dinner with the real ones." It was him, Mom, and Dad at a sushi place. My chair, my literal chair, had been filled by a decorative throw pillow. I laughed out loud. Not the happy kind, more like the laugh that comes right before tears but never quite turns into them. That night I looked around my small apartment. The paint chipped the radiator, hissing the view of a cracked parking lot. It wasn't much, but at least here every inch of space, every flaw, every bill, every choice belonged to me. Still, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about that email, about the quiet erasure that didn't even come with an apology, and somewhere between anger and exhaustion, a thought formed. Maybe Mom was right. Maybe it's time I have my own place. The next morning, I opened my laptop, took a deep breath, and typed, "Homes for sale near Oak Ridge Park." Not because I wanted to run away, but because I was finally done standing still. When you grow up as the family's fixer, silence becomes the loudest rebellion you can commit. I didn't slam doors. I didn't make dramatic announcements. I just stopped showing up. At first, it was small things, declining Sunday dinners, leaving messages unanswered. I figured it would take them a week, maybe two, to notice. But my parents were professionals at selective blindness. Mom's first text came after 10 days. "You missed dinner again, honey. Hope everything's okay." 3 days later, "Your father's been under a lot of stress. We could use your help, but no pressure." No pressure. That phrase made me smile, a tired, bitter kind of smile. Because for 32 years, I'd been pressured into everything, helping, fixing, rescuing, and now, when I finally stepped back, they called it no pressure. I ignored her. I ignored Dad, too, when he left a voicemail about a weird sound in the basement pump. For the first time, I didn't rush to grab my toolkit and drive over like an obedient technician. And then almost poetically, the silence started to echo back. A notification buzzed during lunch one day. From county office. Subject property tax, late payment notice. I nearly laughed. For years, I'd been the one keeping their house afloat, paying on time, organizing their receipts, triple-checking their documents. Now their name was on a delinquent notice. It wasn't even guilt I felt. It was satisfaction. Not cruel satisfaction, just the quiet thrill of justice finally catching up. I closed the email and didn't forward it. That night, I poured myself another glass of wine and sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker against the rain. I imagined my parents' house, the peeling paint on the porch. The garden mom never really tended the roof I'd patched after a storm. It used to be my burden. Now it was their problem. Weeks went by. No texts, no calls. Then suddenly one Sunday morning, I woke to a string of messages. "Dad. Hey, did you change the tax payment login? We can't get in. Dad. 10 minutes later, "It's urgent, Nora. Mom. Your father's upset. Please don't make this difficult." Difficult. That word hung in my mind. After 5 years of paying their bills, I was the difficult one. I didn't reply. Instead, I got dressed, made coffee, and went for a walk through the park. The wind was cold, biting, but it felt purifying. Each breath tasted like freedom. By the time I came back home, another email was waiting. Second notice property tax delinquency fees applied. 2 months late now. I could almost picture Dad sitting at the kitchen table, red-faced, muttering that the system messed up. Mom would probably sigh dramatically, then turn it into a guilt monologue about how stressful life is when your own daughter stops caring. But I did care, just not in the way they wanted. I cared enough to stop feeding a system that thrived on my guilt. I cared enough to finally let them experience what I had lived in for years, neglect disguised as love. It wasn't easy, though. Some nights, lying in bed, I'd hear echoes of my own voice from childhood. "It's okay, I'll fix it, Mom." That voice haunted me more than their silence ever could. To fill the quiet, I started sketching again, something I hadn't done since college. Nothing fancy, just pencil drawings of rooftops, trees, and windows. Maybe I was trying to draw my way out of the memories. One night I found myself sketching a house, 2 stories, peeling shutters, ivy climbing one side. At first I didn't realize it was their house until I'd already shaded the cracked porch rail. My hand hesitated over the paper, and then, without thinking, I drew a new detail, another house next to it. Smaller, with cleaner lines. Mine. That drawing stayed on my desk for days, a reminder that even imagination could be a form of rebellion. A few weeks later, another message came, this time from Dad, but shorter, sharper. "We need to talk about the taxes." I deleted it. Then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed again, an email notification. "Final notice, tax lion pending." A slow breath escaped me. There it was, the consequence they'd never imagined could happen. I clicked open the PDF just to look. The red warning banner glared at me from the screen, and below it, the unpaid balance. For the first time in years, I didn't feel panic. I felt clarity. They had finally built the house without me, and now they were watching it crumble without me too. I whispered into the empty room. Actions have receipts. That night I slept better than I had in months. But in the morning, the silence shifted. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was charged like the air before a storm. Because deep down, I knew what came next. They wouldn't take responsibility. They'd come looking for me. And I was finally ready to let them find a woman they no longer recognized. When you stop pouring everything into someone else's house, you start noticing what your own life is missing. For me, it was space, literal and emotional. I'd spent years existing inside other people's needs. I didn't even know what my needs were anymore. So on a cold Thursday morning, I opened my laptop, searched duplex listings near Oak Ridge Park, and found it. A small 2-unit place with peeling paint warped porch steps and a front yard that looked like it had given up on life. Perfect. I took a day off work, drove out to see it, and stood there in the drizzle, staring at the cracked windows and mossy siding. Most people would have seen a burden. I saw a beginning. The realtor, a man with too much gel in his hair and not enough enthusiasm, kept talking about potential resale value, but I wasn't listening. All I could hear was the wind pushing through the trees, and for once it didn't sound like responsibility. It sounded like freedom. I made an offer the same day. No co-signers, no family, no, we'll help you later promises. Just my name. When the papers went through, I expected to cry. Instead, I laughed. A small, shaky laugh that came from deep in my chest. It wasn't joy, it was relief. The place smelled like mildew and haunted radiators. The kitchen tiles were the color of regret, and one of the outlets sparked when I plugged in my phone charger. But it was mine. The first night, I slept on a mattress on the floor wrapped in a blanket, listening to the creaks and groans of my new home. Every sound reminded me I wasn't patching someone else's roof this time. I wasn't fixing problems I didn't create. Every sound was proof that I was here alone, and that was enough. The next morning, I drove to the hardware store and bought tools, paint, and cleaning supplies. For the next week, I scrubbed, painted, and hammered until my arms ached. I fixed what I could and ignored what I couldn't. Some nights, I watched tutorials until sunrise, learning how to sand cabinets and reseal tile grout. I didn't tell anyone about the house, not even my best friend Lauren. It felt sacred mine to keep secret mine to protect from anyone's commentary or interference. Meanwhile, the texts from my parents kept coming trickling in like water through a leaky faucet. Mom, just wondering if you're still mad about the house thing. Mom, you know we did what's best. Don't be stubborn, sweetheart. Dad, there's been a misunderstanding. Call me. I didn't respond. Instead, I took photos of the duplex the way the morning light hit the windows, the first coat of paint I managed to get, even the crooked but charming front step. I titled the folder on my phone, Proof of Existence. It wasn't about revenge or proving them wrong. It was about proving I existed outside of them. Still, every so often, guilt tugged at me. When I saw a text notification pop up, part of me, the old, obedient daughter, wanted to pick up the phone and fix things. But then I'd remember that moment on the call with Mom. You'll have your own place eventually. And I'd look around at the paint on my hands, the dusty sunlight on the floorboards, and think, eventually is now. 3 weeks later, an email arrived from the county office again. Another late notice, this time with penalties. Their house. Their debt. I stared at it for a long minute, then deleted it. But something about the timing felt poetic, because that same afternoon I got an email from my mortgage agent confirming the final approval. The contrast was too perfect, their house decaying, while mine came to life. I decided to celebrate, not by throwing a party or posting anything online. I just bought myself a proper dinner steak wine and one of those tiny overpriced cheesecakes that come in glass jars. While I ate, I imagined my parents' house, the silence, the unpaid bills, stacking up the peeling paint on the front door I used to fix. Then I imagined Mom sitting in her garden club telling her friends how young people today just don't understand responsibility. The irony almost made me choke on my wine. One evening, while painting the upstairs hallway, I thought about my brother Nathan. I hadn't spoken to him in months. He'd always been the creative one, the dreamer. When he failed, everyone called it a setback. When I succeeded, it was expected. I checked his Instagram out of curiosity. His latest post read, "Hustle hard, stay humble. Family dinner tonight." There it was again, family dinner. That endless rotation of performative normalcy. A picture of him with Mom and Dad at a restaurant I used to love. The caption said, "Family dinner with the real ones." The real ones. My thumb hovered over the screen before I locked my phone. No, I wasn't angry, just numb, because seeing it written out like that publicly made something inside me close for good. They had chosen who belonged, and I had chosen finally not to beg for a seat. By the end of that month, I'd turned the duplex into something livable. The bathroom mirror no longer flaked, the kitchen no longer smelled like wet drywall, and the hallway light, though still flickering, had a strange kind of charm to it. Every small repair felt like stitching a wound I hadn't realized was bleeding. When I finished repainting the bedroom, I stood in the middle of the room, breathing in the faint scent of fresh paint and lemon cleaner. This, I whispered, is mine. No shared deeds, no false promises, just my name on the papers and my sweat on the walls. That night, I fell asleep without checking my phone once. No guilt, no dread, no, what if they need me? Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the caretaker of someone else's chaos. I was the architect of my own peace. And even though I knew the silence wouldn't last forever, I was ready. I'd finally built something they couldn't erase, and soon enough, I'd learned just how much that silence unsettled them. Silence doesn't stay peaceful forever. Eventually, it turns into noise, especially when guilt starts echoing through the walls of the people who caused it. By mid-spring, I'd settled into a rhythm. Work, renovation, solitude. My duplex smelled faintly of sawdust and coffee, an oddly comforting mix that made the air feel alive. Each evening, I'd sit on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the streetlights blink on, one by one, feeling that rare, fragile thing called ownership. Then the messages started coming again, but this time they weren't soft. Mom, you've made your point, but this is serious now. Dad, we just got a call from the bank. Something about a lien. You'd know about this, right, Mom? You're our daughter, Nora. You don't let family drown over a misunderstanding. I didn't respond. Because it wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a choice. They had chosen to erase me from the deed. I had chosen to erase myself from their chaos. But that didn't stop them from trying to pull me back in. 3 days later, a knock rattled my front door. When I opened it, a man stood there, sharp suit, smooth voice, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than my refrigerator. Ms. Carter? He asked politely. Depends, I said. Who's asking? He smiled the kind of smile lawyers use before they ruin your day. I'm Mr. Lanford. I represent your parents. My stomach tightened. Of course you do. He gestured at the porch. May I know? I replied, crossing my arms. We can talk right here. He cleared his throat, flipping through a folder. Your parents are exploring a few financial options. I understand you've contributed significantly to their property over the years. Contributed is a polite word for funded, I said. He gave a thin chuckle, ignoring the edge in my voice. Right. Well, given your involvement, they'd prefer to resolve matters amicably before things escalate. Escalate meaning, what you think they'll sue me for paying their bills. His smile faltered slightly. No, nothing like that. They're just hoping to avoid misunderstandings in case of formal proceedings. That phrase, formal proceedings, made my blood go cold. Are you threatening me? I asked. Not at all. I'm simply here to facilitate a conversation. Tell them the conversation ended 5 years ago when they cashed my help and removed my name. He blinked, clearly not used to resistance. I'll note that. You do that. I closed the door before he could respond. For a full minute, I just stood there, palms pressed against the wood heart pounding. Not from fear, but from recognition. That was the moment I finally understood something brutal, but freeing my parents didn't see me as family anymore. They saw me as an asset, a line item they'd misplaced. So I decided to handle it the way they would. I lawyered up. That night, I sat at my laptop and typed real estate lawyer near me, specializes in family disputes. I emailed 3 firms explaining everything, attaching scanned receipts and tax records. By morning, 2 replied. I picked the one whose website didn't look like it was designed during the Windows XP era. Her name was Amira Patel, and she didn't waste time with niceties. Her reply was concise. Legally, you owe them nothing. Keep your records. Do not respond to them directly. If they attempt coercion, forward all correspondence to me. I read that email 3 times. Each word felt like a breath I'd been holding for years. Finally, someone who spoke the language of boundaries. I labeled a new folder on my desktop, Paid by Nora. I filled it with every transaction screenshot, date, and receipt. Each one was a breadcrumb trail of all the invisible labor I'd done out of love, now repurposed as proof of independence. Meanwhile, my parents' silence turned into noise again, but not directed at me. Through the family grapevine, news started trickling in. My cousin Lila sent me a text. Girl, your dad just yelled at a bank rep so loud the whole branch heard. You good. Another message came from a neighbor I barely knew. Your mom's been crying outside the house. Everything okay? I didn't reply to either. Not out of cruelty, just clarity. Because this was the same woman who had told me, you'll have your own place eventually. Now that I did, she wanted to pretend the world owed her sympathy. Still, late at night, I caught myself wondering how bad it really was. Were they eating properly? Sleeping, fighting. I told myself it didn't matter, but my dreams said otherwise. In one of them, I was back in their kitchen, fixing a broken faucet as Mom watched silently from the doorway. When I turned to ask for a wrench, she was gone. Only the sound of dripping water remained steady, relentless, familiar. I woke up with that sound echoing in my ears. The next week, I got an email from Amira. Your documentation is thorough. If they attempt to involve you in any liability claims, you're fully covered. My advice maintained no contact. No contact, two words that felt like both a shield and a scar. I closed my laptop and walked to the porch. The evening light slanted across the street, turning everything gold for a moment. I took a slow breath, exhaling years of obligation. That was when my phone buzzed again. A new message, unknown number. But I didn't need to open it to know who it was. Dad. The preview line read, "Why are you doing this to us?" I locked the screen, set the phone face down, and whispered to the quiet room, "Because you taught me how." The silence stretched into something else that week, a mirror. And when I looked into it, I didn't see the dutiful daughter anymore. I saw a woman who had finally stopped apologizing for existing. Still deep inside, I knew this wasn't over. Because when people like my parents lose control, they don't surrender quietly. They regroup. They strategize. They come back louder. And I had a feeling the next time they did, they wouldn't be hiding behind emails. They'd come knocking. By early autumn, I thought I'd finally buried the whole ordeal. The duplex was clean, quiet, rented out to a sweet young couple who baked muffins and paid on time. My lawyer had confirmed there'd been no further contact attempts from my parents or their attorney. For the first time in years, I wasn't anyone's emergency contact. Then, one afternoon, while scrolling rental listings for no real reason, I stumbled across a strange ad. Small guest cabin for rent, peaceful, private, surrounded by pine trees. Perfect for someone who enjoys quiet company. The address made me freeze. It was only a few blocks from my parents' old neighborhood, so close that if I stood in the right spot, I could probably see their backyard. My first reaction was a bitter laugh. The universe has a dark sense of humor. I clicked the listing anyway. The photos showed a tiny wooden cabin tucked behind a larger farmhouse, a porch swing, a garden overrun with wild daisies, a crooked mailbox that looked like it hadn't seen mail in years. The owner's name was Mr. Alvin, a retired fisherman who apparently preferred raccoons to humans. Something inside me whispered, "Go see it." So I did. The moment I stepped out of the car, the air felt different, crisp, pine-scented, familiar, in a way that made my chest tighten. Through the trees, I could see the faint outline of my parents' house. For a moment, I almost turned back. But then I heard the porch creak, and a weathered man with a beard that looked older than the cabin itself stepped out. "You the one who texted about the cabin?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Nora." He nodded toward the porch swing. "Sit if you like. Mind the boards, they got opinions?" That made me laugh for the first time in days. We talked for an hour about the area, the weather, his raccoon problem. Apparently, one named Tater kept stealing his socks. He didn't ask questions about my life, and I didn't offer any. When he asked what I did for work, I just said, "Accounting. I keep numbers clean." He nodded. "Good skill. People don't realize how messy life gets until the math don't add up." Something about that line stuck with me. Before I left, he handed me a chipped mug of coffee and said, "If you take it, the only rule's simple. You grill, you share. You make spaghetti, you hide it from Tater." I smiled. I think I can handle that. I signed the lease that same day. A week later, I moved in with just a suitcase, my laptop, and a box of books. The cabin smelled like cedar and old stories. At night, the woods hummed with life crickets, owls, the occasional soft rustle that was probably Tater getting into trouble. It was peaceful. Too peaceful, almost. Because through the curtain of trees, I could see a familiar roofline. My parents' house. My old house. It was still standing, though barely. The paint had faded to a dull gray. The yard looked unkempt. A for sale sign leaned crookedly near the driveway, half swallowed by overgrown grass. I told myself I didn't care, that I'd rented this cabin for the quiet, not for proximity to ghosts. But that first night, when I sat on the porch swing with a blanket and a mug of tea, my eyes kept drifting toward the faint glow in their kitchen window. I could almost hear the clatter of my father's coffee mug, the faint hum of the fridge I once fixed. For the first time since leaving, I wasn't angry. I was curious. Curious how they managed without me. Curious if they'd ever say my name aloud again. Days passed. I worked, read, repainted the cabin walls. Mr. Alvin would stop by with corny jokes or fishing tales, and sometimes Tater would appear at dusk, dragging some shiny, stolen trinket across the porch. It was a strange kind of peace, half contentment, half voyeurism. Then one morning, I was sipping coffee when I noticed movement through the trees. A familiar silhouette stepping out into the yard, my father. He was thinner now, slower. His shoulders drooped. He paced with a phone pressed to his ear, his other hand buried in his hair. For a moment, I thought I could hear fragments of his voice carried by the wind. Bank said, "Final warning." I don't know what to do. I set my mug down and leaned back in the chair out of sight. Minutes later, his pacing stopped. He turned toward the trees toward me and shouted, "Nora, if you're out there somewhere, just talk to us." My heart stopped. He didn't know. He couldn't see me hidden by the pines, but somehow he felt me. I didn't move, didn't speak. I just sat there, the sound of his voice vibrating through the still air. When he finally went back inside, I exhaled slowly, realizing I'd been holding my breath. Mr. Alvin's door creaked open. He stepped onto his porch, squinting through the trees. "You know those folks?" he asked. I hesitated loosely. He nodded. "They seem noisy." "They used to be louder," I said softly. He chuckled and lifted his mug. "Well, the woods are good at quieting people down, eventually." I smiled faintly and sipped my cold coffee. That night, I lay awake listening to the faint sounds of raccoons and the distant creak of my parents' porch. It hit me then. I was close enough to hear their downfall, but far enough to never be pulled into it again. And maybe that was the perfect distance. From my porch swing, I could measure the collapse of their world in sound. At first, it was small, a slamming door, a car starting too early in the morning, a raised voice carried through the trees. But soon even those noises faded. The silence that replaced them didn't feel like peace. It felt like surrender. It started with the yard. Dad used to mow every Sunday like clockwork. His pride was that perfect green lawn, healthier than a golf course he'd boast. But now the grass was yellowed brittle, surrendering to the weeds. The mailbox leaned like it was tired of standing guard. Some mornings I'd see Mom dragging boxes to the curb, decorative pillows, framed photos, the fake fern she loved. Once she stood for a long time holding one of the family portraits. I couldn't see her face clearly, but I knew that posture. Shoulders rounded, hands trembling slightly. The kind of look you get when regret starts whispering in your ear. I told myself I didn't care, but each time I saw her stumble, something in me itched to move to cross the tree line and help her up. I didn't. Because helping now wouldn't heal anything. It would just reset the cycle. One day while I was repainting the cabin steps, I heard a car engine idling longer than usual. When I looked up, I saw a sleek silver sedan parked outside their house. A man in a suit, different from the last one, walked up the steps holding a clipboard. He knocked, waited, knocked again. When the door opened, I caught a glimpse of Dad, unshaven, wearing the same shirt I'd seen him in all week. Their conversation was muffled, but I could read the body language. The man gestured to papers. Dad gestured back angrily. Mom appeared behind him, hands clasped, trying to mediate. Then the man left, shaking his head, and Dad slammed the door so hard the sound echoed through the pines. That evening, I received a text from an unfamiliar number, unknown. "This is serious, Nora. Please, we're losing everything." I didn't need to ask who it was. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the number to my lawyer, Amira. Her response came 2 minutes later. "Do not engage. They are likely attempting emotional leverage." Emotional leverage. That phrase lingered in my head like a bitter perfume. Weeks went by. The for sale sign disappeared. Then it returned with a new sticker, bank owned. The storm had arrived. Every morning I'd sit on the porch swing with my coffee watching their house slowly hollow itself out. Movers came once carrying boxes that looked far too light to contain a lifetime. I saw Mom pacing in the driveway, phone to her ear, while Dad just stood there, hands on his knees, like a man too tired to hold up his own weight. Part of me wanted to yell, "You did this to yourselves," but another part, the child who used to believe she could fix everything, just felt tired. One gray afternoon, while I was bringing groceries from my car, I heard footsteps crunching behind me. Nora. The sound of his voice, hoarse, unsure, stopped me cold. I turned slowly. Dad stood by the fence separating the two properties. His face looked older, worn, like life had been sandpapering him down. He tried a smile, but it faltered halfway. "I thought I saw you," he said. "Didn't believe it at first." I didn't respond. We're losing the house," he said finally. His voice cracked halfway through the sentence. "I know," I said. "I don't know what to do anymore." I met his eyes, steady, calm. "I do. But I stopped offering solutions the moment you made it clear I didn't belong on the paperwork." He winced, the truth hitting harder than any accusation could. "It wasn't personal," he murmured, rubbing the back of his neck. "That's what makes it worse," I said quietly. "If it had been emotional, if it had been a fight, a betrayal, I could have forgiven it. But you erased me like I was an entry error in your tax form." He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. The wind moved through the trees, sharp and cold. For a long moment, we just stood there, two people who shared blood, but not belonging. Finally, he whispered, "We thought you'd always be around." That broke something in me. Not pain, not anger, just finality. I laughed softly, shaking my head. That's exactly the problem. You built your comfort on the assumption I'd never leave. He took a step forward, then stopped. Your mother. She's not. Don't I cut in? Don't make her your excuse. She's been quiet in all the wrong ways for years. He looked away toward the house, where the curtains fluttered weakly in the wind. After a long pause, he asked, Do you really live right there? He pointed toward the cabin. Yep, I said. Been here for months. He blinked, stunned. So all this time you've been right behind us. I wanted to see how long it would take you to look past your lawn, I said. He had no reply for that, only silence. I turned away first, walked back to my porch groceries still dangling from my hand. I didn't slam the door or say goodbye. Just let the quiet swallow the space between us. Inside, I set the bags down, leaned against the counter, and exhaled shakily. My reflection in the kitchen window looked different, somehow lighter, but sadder too. Because the truth was, I didn't hate him. I just finally stopped loving him in the way that hurt me. Later that night, Alvin knocked on my door. He was holding a beer and a half smile. Your folks finally figured out the property line, he said. I raised an eyebrow. That obvious. Loud enough that even Tater ran off, he said. You okay? Yeah, I said after a pause. It's strange. I thought I'd feel vindicated, but all I feel is empty. He nodded knowingly. Closure doesn't always come gift-wrapped. Sometimes it's just quiet. We sat on the porch listening to the crickets. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. When Alvin stood to leave, he added softly, You did what you had to do, Nora. That's not cruelty. That's survival. After he left, I sat there a long time, staring at the faint outline of my parents' dark house through the trees. And I realized something that finally made me smile, not a bitter smile this time, but something gentler. They had spent years teaching me to be responsible. They just never expected me to be responsible for myself. The morning it happened, the sky was colorless, neither light nor dark, like even the sun didn't want to watch. I didn't plan to see it, but the universe has a way of forcing closure right in front of you. It was a Wednesday. I'd gone into town to pick up groceries when I saw a cluster of cars parked along Oak Ridge Lane. Curious faces lingered near the edge of my parents' yard. Clipboards, cheap coffee cups, one man in a windbreaker reading off bids in a bored monotone. It wasn't a gathering, it was an auction. The foreclosure auction. Our house was being sold off like a used appliance. I parked at the corner, pretending to check my phone. From where I stood, I could see everything. The crooked shutters, the wilted tulips Mom had planted last spring, the faded white trim I'd repainted twice during college summers. Now strangers were walking across that same porch, peering through the windows, nodding at its potential. A couple in their 40s pointed at the roofline. The woman asked if the neighbors were decent people. I almost laughed. If only she knew. I didn't stay long. I didn't need to. I just kept walking past the for sale crowd, past the old mailbox that still had the faint letters Carter flaking off the side. I didn't look back until I reached the corner. Then I whispered so quietly it barely left my lips. Goodbye, house. Not goodbye, home. Just house. Because home had left me years ago, long before the paperwork caught up. When I got back to the cabin, a padded envelope was waiting in my mailbox. No return address, no stamp hand-delivered. Inside was a folded letter on cheap paper. The handwriting was jagged, rushed undeniably my father's. We don't know where else to go. The bank took everything. We made mistakes, Nora. But family should mean something. Please, just talk to us. No love, Dad. No, we're sorry. Just a plea wrapped in the same guilt they'd always used. I folded it carefully, placed it inside a drawer next to my old spare keys, the same ones that used to open their front door. Then I whispered to the empty room. Maybe you should have remembered who paid for that door in the first place. A few days later, Alvin knocked on my porch rail with a mug of iced tea. They're gone, he said simply. I didn't have to ask who. The movers came yesterday morning. Left before noon. He paused. Didn't say where they were headed. I nodded, staring through the trees toward the empty house. I figured. He hesitated, then asked softly, You gonna miss it? I thought about that for a while. The smell of sawdust after I'd patched the garage. The sound of rain against the attic window I once fixed. The laughter that used to live inside those walls before it turned sharp and conditional. Not the house, I said, finally. Just the version of me who believed they'd ever come around. Alvin nodded, taking a slow sip. That's fair. We sat in silence for a bit, listening to the leaves rustle. Tatter the raccoon waddled across the porch, dragging someone's lost sock in his mouth. You know, Alvin said, smiling faintly. Peace looks good on you. I smiled back. It took a long time to earn it. Over the next few weeks, I watched new life trickle into the empty house. The grass was trimmed. the broken shutters replaced. A new couple moved. In a woman with silver hair and an easy laugh, and her husband who always waved when he saw me walking down the trail. They didn't know me. They didn't know the story. To them, I was just the quiet woman who lived in the cabin behind the trees. And that was enough. One afternoon, I saw the woman kneeling in the yard, planting flowers, tulips of all things. She laughed when the soil got under her nails. Her husband teased her for ruining her sweater. The scene was so normal, so tender, that it hurt in a strange, sweet way. Maybe that's what real ownership looks like, I thought. Not deeds or signatures, just showing up for what's yours. I stayed until dusk, watching the sunlight bend across the lawn, painting the house in gold for the first time in years. Then I turned back toward my cabin, where peace waited quiet and patient. As I stepped inside, my phone buzzed. A voicemail, unknown number. I hit play. Nora, it's Evan, your dad's cousin. They asked me to tell you they're staying with a friend out near Maple Ridge. He said to say he's sorry. There was a pause. Anyway, thought you should know. I stood there for a while, the phone still glowing in my hand. Then I deleted the message. Not because I hated them, because I didn't need to carry it anymore. Later that evening, I sat on the porch swing with a blanket and a notebook, watching the new owner's lights flick on one by one. For years, that house had been the center of my identity, my guilt, my worth, and now it was just background noise. The past wasn't gone, it just finally stopped demanding attention. I leaned back, eyes on the fading stars, and whispered to myself, I'm done being a ghost in someone else's story. Some people lose homes. Others lose illusions. I lost both and found freedom in the space they left behind. Spring came early that year. The pines outside my window shimmered in fresh green, and sunlight began spilling through the trees in long, forgiving rays. The air smelled new. It almost smelled like forgiveness until I remembered that some wounds aren't meant to close neatly. I had gotten used to quiet, the kind that hums instead of hurts. My days had rhythm morning tea on the porch, work dinner with Alvin sometimes, and an evening swing with Tater lurking in the grass, waiting for crumbs. Life had softened at the edges. Then one morning I opened my mailbox and froze. No stamp, no address. Just my name written in familiar cursive. The paper trembled slightly in my hands as I unfolded it. Inside was a photograph, faded, creased at the corners. Me, at maybe 6 years old, sitting on Dad's shoulders at the county fair, cotton candy bigger than my head, both of us laughing mid-motion. Mom must have taken it. On the back in her handwriting, we weren't always like this. Sorry. That single word. Sorry looked shaky, hesitant, like someone unsure if they had the right to use it. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just stared at it for a long time, feeling every version of myself layered between then and now. The girl on his shoulders full of trust. The young woman who thought loyalty guaranteed love. The daughter who stopped showing up. And finally, the woman who watched from the trees and let it all fall apart. I looked up toward their old house, the new owner's house now. The tulips the woman planted were blooming strong and red. The windows gleamed. The laughter that carried through the air didn't sting this time. It sounded right, like the house had finally exhaled. That evening, Alvin was on his porch with a deck of cards and 2 glasses of lemonade. He waved me over. You look like someone who found something that didn't ask to be found. I sat beside him, the photograph in my hand. They left this in my mailbox, I said. He squinted. Good memory, bad one. Both, I admitted. It's weird. They destroyed so much of what we had, but this picture, this moment, it's proof that there was something once. He nodded. You don't have to burn the past to move on, Nora. Just don't drag it behind you. I smiled faintly. I think I'll keep it then. Somewhere out of sight, but not gone. He clinked his glass against mine. That's balance. That night, back inside the cabin, I took a small hammer and lifted one of the loose boards above the window. I slid the photo behind it, tucked away like a sealed chapter. Not a trophy, not a wound, just a page in a story that finally had an ending. As the board clicked back into place, I whispered softly, You taught me how to hold on, Mom. You just never taught me when to let go. Later, as dusk fell, I returned to the porch swing. The forest breathed quietly around me. Alvin's radio played faint jazz. Somewhere in the distance, Tater chittered triumphantly, probably stealing someone's sandwich again. I watched the lights flicker on at the new house. A couple laughing through open windows, chasing each other with dish towels. I thought about how life moves on, how the same walls can hold pain one year and joy the next. It didn't make me sad, it made me human. The wind carried faint voices, Alvin humming the rustle of trees, the steady rhythm of peace. For the first time in forever, I wasn't waiting. Not for apology, not for validation, not even for closure. Just the next morning. When my cousin Evan called the next day, his voice was casual, like small talk after a storm. "So what did your dad say in the end?" he asked. I looked out across the trees where sunlight caught the new tulips and the porch light of someone else's future. I smiled faintly and said, "He said the bank was calling." Then I ended the call, set the phone down, and let the quiet wrap around me, not heavy this time, but warm. Because for once in my life, the silence didn't mean absence. It meant peace. And that peace had my name on it, mine alone.